All right, guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of the CX Chronicles Podcast. Super excited today, folks. I have one of my friends joining the show today, Gene Patrick, CEO and founder at ScaleUp Edge, based out in the Boulder, Colorado area. So, Gene, why don't you say hello to the CX Nation?
Hey, hi everybody, and Adrian, thanks for having me on. I was looking forward to this. It's always fun to have conversation working with you and really focus around the customer side of things.
100%. And guys, Gene has got we were just literally joking before jumping on today's episode, but like Gene's got a very interesting background, similar to me selfishly, where she gets to work with a lot of different founders, a lot of different startup teams, a lot of different startup executive teams, and she's really spent so much time thinking about what goes into not just leadership. And Gene, I'm pumped to get into all the knowledge and all the incredible experiences you have in leadership, but what goes into building a business? What goes into building a company, a product, a service? How do you even think about getting customer excitement before you can get employee excitement? And she spends a ton of time thinking about that. So, Gene, I'm pumped. I'm pumped to get into your story today. Why don't you start us off? Why don't you spend the first couple of minutes just setting the stage for our listeners? Gene, how did you get into this entire world? What were some of the stepping stones that you kind of had to go through before starting ScaleUp Edge and getting into the work that you do today?
Yeah, thanks. I have, it's interesting to think back to how you get to where you are today, because I will tell you, I never said, hey, I want to go and work for a startup. I want to go create a startup. My career has been, I've been working with a lot of different industries. I've worked with telecom, legal services, a number of different areas. And then I could even tell you that I've carried a lot of different hats, I call it, different roles along the way. And I think probably the common denominator for me is I tend to not be afraid of working through the hard problems. And so there are many times that I tell this to people. Used to sit at my kitchen table probably once a month and go, whew, I don't know about this one. This problem's going to be tougher than the last one that I worked through. And I'm going, and all I have to do is just take a breath and work through it. And I think the key has always been to really stay focused on what are you trying to solve, and having the communication and connection with your customer, whether it's an internal customer or external client, of what you're trying to solve for them, and stay in constant communication. So yeah, it's how did I get here? I was really a good mentor of mine, really strong mentor of mine, came to me a couple of years ago and said, she used to work for a venture capital company, and she used to travel the world. And actually, she still does that, but she has moved on in some different areas. But she said, I kind of say the same thing over and over again when we go in to work with portfolio companies. And what I'd like to do is to look at it for a way to kind of package up and set the foundation for people that companies that I work for. So she asked me to be part of this startup. Since then, she's moved on, so I kind of have taken the wheel and looking for ways to provide for scale-up executives the ability to find what they need, when they need it, and how they want it delivered. And I say that in a way to go, with the digital age nowadays, things change so fast,
Yep.
and learning from each other, like I learn from you, Adrian, every day we talk, just little nuggets of gold that help you kind of, carry through to help you solve that next problem. So that's really how I got to where I am.
I love it. And Gene, you're right. There's a couple of things. Number one, just learning from other people's mistakes, not rebuilding the wheel, understanding what worked, what didn't work, understanding who's gone on that type of a journey or who has not. That's like, guys, whether you're building a CX or a CS team, or whether you're building a sales team, an ops team, a DevOps team, that's one of the easiest tricks for any leader to be able to kind of get a little bit of an advantage. And then the other thing too, and Gene, you and I were literally just joking about this. This is how you build a community of people, guys, right? This is how you build a community of people who are subject matter experts across all these different walks of life and all these different industries and all these different like backgrounds, right? But just even hearing Gene's like stepping stones, that is one of the easiest ways that you can really start to just expand your knowledge, expand even knowing who some of the people are that know the things that you need to maybe tap them from time to time. So I love that.
Hmm.
Gene, the other thing too, that obviously this is why, guys, I was saying Gene and I have a very similar type of background. So you're working with a bunch of different startup companies, and you just said you wanted to help to kind of package or to curate some of the common examples or the common questions that just kept coming again and again. Sounds a lot like some of the stuff that we're doing at CXC, Gene, with some of our CX and our CX focus folks. But what was like the birthing ideas of this? So you mentioned the friend that was working at a VC group, but how did you start to test or iterate this, Gene? How did you find the first couple companies that you wanted to kind of put some of this information, put some of these ideas, put some of these different best practices in front of, to see if you had something on your hands there? Out of curiosity, I wonder how you sort of vetted and got some general interest in some of the first folks that you started working with at ScaleUp Edge.
Yeah, so there's a couple different areas. So, I'm a startup like everybody else, right? So you find your product market fit, you find what is the market that goes along with this. And so so before I go into that, one thing I'll say really quickly with what you just mentioned, you know what? Your network is so important with your as you start up a company, because it's who you know, it's leveraging that network. It's people don't think that they're a subject matter expert, but you know what? There are things that you've experienced that have worked or didn't work for you that could probably work for me. And so and it's interesting how people want to give back. So I there was a couple different avenues that we did with the startup. Is we worked with so there was a number of within our network where executives, a couple of them, I can tell you, for example, left corporate America, large company, corporate America, and they moved, and they basically wanted to move into the C-suite. And to do that really quickly, shouldn't say quickly, but the chances of moving into a C-suite quickly is really through SaaS tech companies, because there's so many of these companies starting up that need really strong leadership. So we've worked with a couple of our network folks that moved to that startup scale up area, and they were used to running within a big company.
Sure.
And so, as you know, in scale up, as you're growing your company, you don't have as many resources. You don't have as many, you have to pay attention to cash flow, which in large company, I've been there too, you have to think about your P&L as well, but you have more resources to pull from.
Definitely.
So in working with these executives, it's really kind of focusing them to focus on prioritization, data and prioritization. You know, what are the areas that are important to kind of grow your company and get your arms around it? You can't do everything, even though you have done it as an executive in a large company. You have to really have that focus. So we worked with some of those executives, and also I worked with actually a large organization, a province up in Canada, where they were investing into looking to diversify within their province into more of a SaaS technology environment. And so we were fortunate enough to work with a handful of companies there to really help them jumpstart. Not only we created a community for them, but also that they could learn from each other. But also what we did is we created kind of a packaged up based on certain topics of how they can grow and learn from each other, as well as learning from some of the global resources that I have within my network. So there's two different ways that we kind of started down that path.
So super cool. And guys, full candor, Gene, I had the pleasure of Gene introducing me to a bunch of these awesome companies coming out of Western Canada. And she's right. I mean, some of the things that are happening are pretty amazing, but Gene, some of the stuff that you were doing for them with ScaleUp Edge, and the packaging and the compartmentalization and the templatization and the I mean, honestly, just having a robust wealth of knowledge and assets that you, as a startup, this stuff's hard, guys. For people that, for some of our listeners who haven't had the pleasure or the luxury of starting a company, it is one of the hardest things you could possibly do. I don't care what you're selling. I don't care what space you're in. I don't care if you're awesome at sales or terrible at sales. It is the hardest thing that you could possibly do. There is so much truth to the analogy of a roller coaster. There's ups, there's downs, there's twists, there's turns. you're
Right.
ready to be a decamillionaire one day and you're ready to go back to washing dishes the next. And it is what it is. But Gene, you and your team at ScaleUp did an incredible job of packaging this and really helping some of these different startup founders understand where to go find information, where they can utilize some of the resources that you guys did, some of the content. You did some incredible work on the content side. So all super awesome things. Gene, I'd love to dive into the first pillar of team. I'd love for just to hear you talk about, so a couple things. Number one, you've personally worked at all these different businesses. You've consulted in a number of different companies. And then with ScaleUp Edge, you've been able to work hand in hand with all these different founder and startup executive teams. Spend a couple minutes talking about that first pillar team. What are, like, along your journey and along all the different things that you've been able to do, what are some of the key themes or some of the main focus areas that you think our listeners should really be thinking about when it comes back to how they can build and scale and manage their team in an effective way?
Yeah, I have this story that I've told a number of people. So I started my career many, many years ago. One of the things that I did was I coached high school sports.
Nice.
And so
Wait, which sports, Gene?
I did. Actually, it was basketball was my go-to sport. I played that through college, but I also coached volleyball and fast pitch softball.
Awesome, nice, very nice. Wait, any
Yeah.
championships to boot here, or what? Anything we
Well,
need to
yeah,
talk about?
we had a few, right? We were pretty successful in high school and also in college. So, but it wasn't big Division One. I was in a Division Two school, but it was really, basketball was my life for a long time. So, team is really important to me. And so I can tell you this story that it really resonated with me, and I is like this light bulb went off. Is I was coaching this high school basketball team, and the year that we had an incredible player. She was so good, so motivated. She was like the superstar of superstars, and I was coaching a JV team at the time. And what was interesting that year is we won 3 games. We only won 3 games with this. She was amazing. The next year, she moved up to the varsity level, and I had average team players, right? Average players, and we only lost 3 games that year. So what it really made me think about is, the need to have that team cohesion and be able to have each, because what happened was the team, when we had the superstar on the team, they relied on her to do everything. And so then the next year they had to really find their strength and be able to work together as a team to be able to build on that. And I know it sounds a little corny, but I will tell you, I've carried that story with me forever, because when I build a team or when I'm part of a team, you know what? It's nice to have a superstar, but you have to have the team that is filling in the gaps for each other. So when I build a team, I know some of my gaps, some of my areas that I need help with. I will hire for that. So so that's and I think I've had some pretty incredible teams. We have our issues and our challenges, but I will tell you, even one of my last teams that I worked with prior to ScaleUp Edge was just amazing. Like, they were rock stars, and if you took them away from each other, they were really strong team members. But you put us together as a whole, I tell you, we couldn't be stopped. So in ScaleUp, what we do with companies that are starting up or scaling, you obviously, as I said earlier, you have only so many resources. So when you get to that where you've grown, you have product market fit, and now it's time to add somebody to the team. That's a big investment, because if you don't invest wisely, it's costly, and it could take you months to get through that and to that mistake. And in ScaleUp, as you know, Adrian, you don't have a lot of time. So you have to move quickly and make decisions along the way. So what I really tell people is, don't hire for a title, which is really interesting. Is, I have people call me up. Oh, I think I need a chief technology officer. Well, why is that? What is it you want them to do? What I do is I basically say, get focused on what competency you need to add to your executive team. What are the areas that, as a team, that you have an opportunity to fill because people like you, Adrian, and me, and a lot of people who listen to these podcasts, you guys have worn many hats, so when you tend to hire for a title, really pay attention to what else they have done in their background that they have done well, and how does that add to the team.
First of all, I think that's a brilliant piece of advice. It's especially in today's world. I know that there's a lot of different people that think titles mean everything. Look, the bottom line is it's like going back to your first point too, like culture is truly one of the most imperative factors in all of this, right? You need to bring someone on when you're at the point where you're ready to bring someone onto the team. And even if you're a huge company, by the way, even if you're a massive company,
Right.
bringing on
Yeah.
a 5,000th employee, right? Making sure that you understand what type of person, what type of traits, what types of factors are going to equal your ability to have people that can hopefully only lose 3 games instead of only winning 3 games, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
that is huge. The other piece too, for our startup founder friends, like Gene, I couldn't agree with you more in terms of like sometimes too by over focusing on these titles, over focusing on trying to slam a circular object into a square hole, you absolutely can trip up some of your organizational growth and some of the natural momentum that might occur if you just focus on some of the actual activities or the tasks, or think about the things that actually drive your business forward, right? Finding new customers, having awesome activities that equal awareness, where people know who you are, know what you're doing. Obviously, a product, having an awesome product built by, even if it's a small team and if it's a simple thing, but like focus on the stuff that matters, right? And I think the other thing too
Yeah.
is you're right. There's been so many times, I know with similar to Eugene, we work with a number of different venture capital backed startup companies. Like there's been so many times where by I call them false start hires. When you have a false start on a hire and you bring the wrong guy or gal into the business, where maybe you give them a wrong title, or maybe you don't necessarily create picture perfect bullseyes around what their focus areas and their ownership areas are going to be, or the areas of accountability,
Yes.
responsibility, and authority that you're giving them. That's where you can easily start to kind of deviate from the initial mission or the initial core values or the initial driving factors that you're kind of aiming your ship towards, right? Because once you get these boats out into the ocean, you gotta kind of at least know what direction you're sailing, so that there's going to be a lot of blips along the way, but you got to at least know what direction you're going in. And pulling a false start on the wrong type of leader, the wrong type, or adding the wrong type of role early can have devastating effects downstream. So I think
Yeah.
that's really awesome advice.
You're right, both culturally, financially, and really impacting your customers as well. You go along the way. I tell this. I think I have a 17-year-old son. He's in high school, and I tell people, by the time he gets out of college, the title that he's going to get his job is probably not even created yet. Different than when I started, years and years ago, right? Titles tend to stay the same, but I really focus on what are their core competencies. You talk about communication, and I look for people that can learn quickly, and they have stories to tell that can speak to that with
Yeah.
their experiences. So yeah, it's important.
I
We're in a people business. One way. I mean, people go, you know what? Well, don't you build product? Yes, but you know what? The product could be the shiniest little, tool out there. But if I can't, get people rallied around it, go after the vision and work with customers from a people perspective, I don't care how good the product is. That's the way I look at it.
totally agree, Gene. People buy products and services from other people, and
Yeah.
those products and services are built by people, right? It is
Right.
people business
Right.
all day long. I love that.
Right. Right.
Gene, let's dive into the second CX pillar tool. So this is cool. I was excited to chat with you about this and you and I have talked about this in a bunch of our conversations over the years, but like you get to see, well, number one, you get to see a lot of different tools being built, right? A lot of the customers and a lot of the clients that you're working with are building these incredible, new pieces of technology and stuff that are going to drive companies into the future. But then you probably use a bunch of different tools yourself to manage ScaleUp Edge and just to keep all the different things that you guys are doing. I'd love for you to spend a couple minutes talking about tools and really how along your journey you've kind of seen certain executive teams or certain founding teams do a dynamite job of managing their tech stack and managing the technology that
Oh,
they're
goodness.
investing in. And then I'm sure you've
Yeah.
seen the opposite, where you've seen other companies where like, what are you guys doing and why are you spending all this money like drunken sailors? So like I'd
Yeah.
love for you to spend a couple minutes talking about tools.
I had so I boy, I could talk a lot about this. Because there's so many tools out there, and they're all good. They're all good. And I say that, well, I shouldn't say all of them. So, the majority of the tools out there are amazing. You've got a lot of people that have great ideas. I had a company come to me about a month and a half ago that said, "Okay, what's the best community out there?" And here, I'm looking at these different kind of systems, and I said, "Wait a minute, you're moving too fast. Don't buy the system and try to figure out how to put it into your business. What is it you're trying to solve? What is it you're trying to do with this? What is your processes, and what's the best way to do that?" So I said, if you don't understand the process ahead of time, what your needs are, going and buying a tool, it could be a hit or miss, and I said, to tell you the truth, if you're chasing after that shiny little ball that's going out there, that little toy, that little tool out there, I said, next week there's going to be one that's even better. So you got to really focus on that piece of it. And I think that really resonated with them. I was part of a company prior to ScaleUp Edge that I was their chief transformation officer, and one of the interesting things with them is that they had about 400 different systems, and it was a mid-sized company. And what was happening was people in their different business lines were buying a tool that they were used to
Okay.
in their prior life
Yep.
to use. So, and it was all good, but nobody was paying attention to what is it we're trying to accomplish cross-functionally.
Yeah.
And so that's probably the biggest tip that I would say to you from that perspective, and is to really understand if you're chasing software, think about first what you need to do. Are there good tools out there? Absolutely. And I would tell you some of those good tools that I've used are the ones that I have experience with. You could probably say the same thing with what you've used are good tools. So I would say think about that. But I would also, the other thing, going back to what we talked about earlier, is the learning from each other. I would not be afraid to pick up the phone and call one of my people that are within my network and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a customer experience tool. What do you use? What do you see best about it? What's going on with that?" And know that getting a couple people's insight from your network, from the community, is, I think, as important as you trying to figure out what you're trying to solve.
I could not agree more, Gene. And I think it's funny that you're right. There's almost like this piece of like not putting the cart before the horse here, and you mentioned the process, and we're going to dive into that in a second, but like, you're right. If you're not taking the time to delicately or to carefully map and understand all the different use cases, all the different needs, all the different feature sets that could theoretically apply, not just to marketing, not just to sales, not just to ops, not just to finance, but to many. And then more importantly, like, everybody knows, good data in, bad data out. And I'd say a lot of companies, especially in the venture world, right, where to your point, once a company raises some capital, and once a company starts to be able to hire guys and gals that have been there, done that, they've already got exactly, like, they already know inside of their playbook which 3 tools they're going to come in and ask for on day one, so that they can start doing all the things that you're asking them to do with leading their area of expertise. You're starting to number one, fragment all of this information across a customer journey. Number two, on the employee experience side, whether you realize it or not, you're putting your team in an interesting position, because then they're stratifying a lot of the customer data and a lot of the new findings and the learnings and the things that are happening within your portfolio, which makes a totally separate mess for your data science team, your analytics team. And then the other piece too, though, is this is where, even in a world that's supposed to be incredibly collaborative, building an open, working with each other, and really trying to build across an incredible customer experience, you're building silos, and you're building different like tranches of department and team early into the DNA of the business. And that's crazy. The last part is this, and this is just as like the founder in me, the brass tacks, guys. Like, the minute that you start to go from having 3 excellent primary tools that can effectively manage 95% of the things that you need to do at this level right now today, and you start getting into the world of having 400 solutions at X dollars a month,
right?
It's gonna be hard to find a CFO that likes that whole story, right? That's not a good place to be. But the last part too is, I just think over the last 3 years with COVID, and just with the Great Resignation and all these news stories that have been leading around different ways of thinking about CX and EX, we've worked with a number of different companies at CXC, Gene, where a huge part of the employee consternation, it is actually fueled and it derives from what we're talking about right here, meaning they already know that there's 400 tools. They know that 80% of them are wildly underutilized if used at all. And then the other part is because they're sitting in that seat every single solitary day, they see the fragmentation and they see the lack of being able to tell one story or one view across a business. And that's kind of right there, like how some of the EX stuff can start to creep into the CX stuff, right?
Yes.
Where because you got a bunch of people that aren't thrilled to be there, and you got a bunch of people that are kind of annoyed that they've already given all this incredible feedback around how you can optimize, iterate, and innovate.
Right.
Nobody's taking it, and you're just going and buying another tool instead of giving someone a raise. That's going to get pretty old pretty quick, right? That's not necessarily a fun place to be.
Yeah, I will tell you that company that had the 400 systems, it definitely was an easy way to kind of go, okay, what should we do from, how should we lower that cost? Because it was a huge cost. But what we did, and I'm probably going to get into the process stuff, but what we did is
let's dive into that third pillar process.
So what we did is we said, okay, let's go through and understand the customer journey. So we went through from sales order all the way to that customer experience success side of things. And we went and we mapped it out. And we also identified what systems were involved in that customer journey. And it was interesting so we took separate groups of people and we said, okay, what do you do? What's the input and output and what systems do you use? And so when we put it all together for the team to come back to look at it from an end-to-end perspective, there were a lot of people that were saying things like, I didn't realize you did that too.
Yep.
TOO, right?
Yeah.
Duplication. You pull that from that system. It's the same stuff we pulled from this other system. So, it was, and it wasn't because people are bad or trying to do the wrong thing. It's that what happened and what happens, and I see this, is companies grow so fast. They grow so quickly and they have to hire quickly and they have to bring people on. And, at startup, scale up companies, you tend to not have a really strong onboarding. So people do what they think is, what is best. And so that company got to a place because they grew so quickly without, connecting dots. And that's really, we did as a team is, as a group of people, we then connected the dots and said, okay, here's the issue here. Let's solve this from a customer experience perspective, because it goes back to what you said is not only is it an employee experience that was challenging and manual and, people were working like crazy, many hours, but also that customer experience, it was growing so quickly that we were starting to feel the impact. We were starting to see the impact that we were making to the customer.
Yep. I think, Gene, it's funny when people think about process and people start talking about journey maps, whether it's customer journey maps, employee journey maps, product journey maps, I continue to be, and again, I know I'm lucky because I have a lot of these conversations every day, but I continue to be blown away by how many teams, they misunderstand the value of doing that mapping. Meaning, when I first of all, when I think about a customer journey map, for example, one of the correlating bars that I would think about while we're working with our customers is literally understanding not just the different mediums that you're using and the different needs and likes and dislikes, but I also think about the data management piece, right? I think about, especially when you're a growing company, because this is when it's actually technically easier to build some of the stuff in earlier and have it baked into your DNA. Obviously, as you raise more funds, as you go sell the next 5,000 customers, you can obviously afford different types of solutions and things like that. But on the process side, there's not enough companies that think about their customer journey map and then alongside it, think about the different analytical steps or the different things that you're already measuring or counting, or think about some of the different performance metrics and KPIs that theoretically you already know what's important, say in the awareness and the consideration phase. Yeah, a lot of companies are getting excellent at understanding onboarding. They know that the better that you can run a customer through onboarding, the higher the probability that they're going to be sticky, they're going to be engaged, they're going to be promoters because they're going to see the value of your product or your service right out of the gate. And then you get into the account management world. What do you do to retain people? What do you do to upsell people, cross-sell people? My point here is for people that want to say that some of these journey maps are useless or they're not really helpful, I don't think you maybe have seen how they're done properly. And I don't know that you've maybe had the right people around the table to help create a complete picture, because you just said connecting dots. I think about journey maps almost as blueprints. I think if they're done properly and if they're done really well, again, with the right SMEs around the table, not if just a bunch of CXers, that's not going to work.
Right.
You got to have sales, you got to have ops, you got to have finance, you got to have tech for sure. Then you get CX and CS for the color, and then you got to have executive sponsorship built into that, right? If you don't have an executive sponsor or two baked into this, nothing's going to happen, and then you're basically starting from scratch. But I love
and it's a lot of work and time that you take out of somebody's day if you don't have that sponsorship.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Well, you know what? The other thing I will tell you, prior to this role that I was experiencing, the customer journey piece. Prior to that, I will tell you, some of the bigger companies, we would talk about journey maps, and it would take months and months to get it completed. And I will tell you that customer journey mapping, when I started my career, was like a year-long process. And by that time, I don't know what it was, but I had this really negative connotation about journey mapping, customer journey mapping. But I will tell you, I have grown through my experiences and understand the importance of it. And really what I do anytime I go about any kind of a process to help out, I always start, what is the as is process? So when you do a customer journey map, in my world, in my thinking, is you're kind of doing the as is experience of that customer. What is the customer going through? What are they experiencing? And boy, I think it is probably one of the most important things to understand, so that as you think you're making some good choices and changes along the way as you grow, you're taking in consideration, how is that going to impact that customer journey?
Yep.
And so it's it sounds like big business. It's interesting. When we did it in that company that I referred to, I had a couple of people say, "Oh, this is going to take forever." We got it done in a week. But we rolled up our sleeves and really worked hard at it. And that's why I think what you guys do at your company, Adrian, was what you guys do. I think it's so critical for a lot of these companies that are scaling through the process. Is pay attention to that.
Gene, I'm glad that you said that, because hearing you say it like that, like I think it's almost like trying to watch a movie over. When you mentioned the one example or one potential path at like a large organization, I get it, large companies, it's harder to do anything. But if you're going to take 12 months to watch a movie, how good's that movie going to be? It's probably people are going to see it in different doses. There's going to be like, whereas if you can watch that movie in the 2 hours it was intended to be watched, and I'm glad that you call this out, because at CXC, some of the customer journey mapping work that we do, we try to fly through it. Number one is to get people excited about all of the opportunities, because you're literally documenting it and defining strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. You're giving people, oftentimes, especially at these venture companies, you're oftentimes giving them the first time that they can actually look at their business or look at their journey in one place, right? One view. And lastly, and selfishly, you're teeing up the CTAs on the spot. You're literally seeing up calls to action required to, even if it's just the low hanging fruit, even if it's the quick and dirty stuff that you can bang out and you can kind of see some quick wins and some quick results. But like, that's one of the reasons why we try to fly through our stuff, is get people cranked up and motivated, and almost as fast as possible, show them how quickly we can identify and bring you right to a CTA place where we can start doing prioritization. We can do delegation, ownership. ROI is another big piece. A lot of, especially in the startup world, when an executive team, a younger executive team especially, can sort their CTAs by ROI, right? And you can see literally which calls to action are require the biggest, they're going to have the biggest bang for your buck or the biggest return for your investment. Why wouldn't you follow that type of a methodology? But again, there's a lot of different ways of doing this. And even with our listeners right now, I bet you some of our listeners are listening and go, dude, I don't do like that. It takes me a month to bang out a journey, and I've got to do all my stick-it notes, and I got to do all the different sessions, and I got to have all the different SMEs come in at different. So like, I get it. There's a ton of different ways you can do this, but so Gene, I'd love to dive into the fourth and final CX pillar, feedback. And I was excited to chat with us about you. And this is a good segue, but I'd love to kind of hear some of the things that have worked for you along your journey, with ways that you've kind of really tapped into getting and using customer feedback, and ways that you've tapped into your teams and your employees, and how you've been able to use some of that feedback to drive innovation.
Yeah, so you know what, don't be afraid to ask your customers, and listen to what they have to say. So one of the companies that I used to work for a few years ago, they brought me in as a general manager for one of their, a third of their revenue stream, and it was a healthcare vertical that we were supporting, and it was a speech analytics company. So they had So it was really, really interesting. We had some very large healthcare companies that were part of our client base. And when I started to go out and it was a SaaS technology company that we supported their call centers around customer satisfaction. And so when I went out and identified all the customers and I went out and visited them, they said, "You're the first person that has visited us outside of sales." And I said, "Okay, well, let's talk about things." And I will tell you, 8 out of 10 customers that I was talking to, they were going to not renew
Wow.
their subscription because you know what, they didn't know how the product needed to be used. All they were getting were new upgrades, and things just weren't happening as well as they were having turnover at their executive level, so they didn't understand what the product did for them. So
Sure.
so pay attention to your customer base of their not so much turnover, people getting, promoted and moving back, you're getting new people coming in. Pay attention to that because they have a different set of kind of experiences with what your product is that's coming
Yep.
into it, that they're coming into. But so long story short, we paid attention. We saw quite a few gaps that we needed to fill along the way. A lot of it was just really educating them as to the value and what and understanding what their gaps were, and to be able to bring some solutions and work with them to get things going. So some of the things I do with customer experience, I've ran customer success teams. I was part of a company that had 2 people that were really driving the customer retention group, which was crazy. And they couldn't even connect with their customers and be able to work with them. So we put in place, some automation that made sense to be able to get more feedback. So get feedback. Know that you can't fix for every customer out there,
Yep.
but what you can do is you can understand and prioritize and what are the biggest gaps out there. But communicate not only the first time, but give feedback back to the customer. I ran a very large call center for a telecom many years ago, and it was a tier 1 technical call center. And
Okay.
my boss at the time said, "Gene, go out to," and it was out in Ohio, and he said, their customer satisfaction scores were like in the toilet. Go out there and assess to determine, should we shut it down, should we keep it running? And so one of the first things I did is I went to the team and I said, "I know you probably wonder why I'm here." And they knew they weren't doing well. So I said, "Let's figure out how we're going to solve this." So we did so get your team involved in understanding, because everybody wants to do. You don't go to work and say, "Okay, I'm going to do a bad job." They knew they were not doing well,
Yeah.
but they wanted to fix it.
Yep.
But one little thing I'll just share with you, and this is the old school way, is so we had some very large customers that we supported their network. So when their network went down, whew, that was not good. So we put some SLAs in place, but we would send them it was a recommendation of my team, send them a postcard to
Okay.
say, "Thanks for being a customer." We'll keep an eye on it. Whatever they wrote, it was a handwritten note, just short. I know it's old school. We mailed it to the customer. And they love that. But this day and age, it's more probably digital that would go along with that. But it's just, but if you think about whatever that medium is it's really about communicating and following up and following your sword. If it didn't work, just be open and honest and just work with your customers on that, because they're the ones that they want you to succeed too. They
Yep.
don't want you as a company to fail,
Yep.
because your failure is their failure.
100%.
So they want to figure that out. Some customers are harder to work with than others. That's just part of the job.
That is definitely part of the job. And that is something that I very much guarantee you our listeners are probably thinking about some of their examples of some of those difficult customers. But again, difficult customers do help us with driving innovation. They help us with
Yes.
understanding where future investments need to come from, future hires. They help us with
Yes.
understanding what tools or what processes need to be adjusted or reinvested in. And frankly, they keep us on our toes, right? And I know that they
Right.
can be difficult, and it's never fun to get smoked with an irate customer. That can be difficult, but you do grow from it, you do get better from it, and then on top of it, there's ways of creating separate processes and separate systems for even managing that. So Gene, that's all awesome stuff. One last quick comment on your example there of the handwritten notes. Be creative with different mediums, guys, because Gene's spot on. We're even in a digital world, and even in a world where so many of us are focused on building digital experiences with our products or services, the way that you even engage with your customers. Be open to different mediums. We've even had past guests, Gene, on the show who literally are running a multi-million-dollar business, helping do handwrittens for people who have huge customer portfolios, because it does still work, and people do still like getting different modalities. So like a mailer here, or different tangible things that can get sent to a people still love that stuff. So like,
right, I do, don't you? I mean, you love it. I mean, I do.
A little surprise and delight. Everybody likes a surprise and a delight. It's a nice to have. And then at the very least, any customer, even the grumpiest of customers, they're going to say, at least they tried. This is interesting. Right. Try. They did something different, and people like the try, right? They like what we're doing, trying to be creative and stay ahead. So, Gene, before we let you go, first of all, this is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Where can people find out more about you? If people want to learn about ScaleUp Edge, if they want to learn about some of the awesome things that you're doing, where can people find you?
Yeah, we have a website at scaleupedge.com, ScaleEdge, all one word, .com. And what we do is we focus, we're basically, we're creating a leadership development platform that delivers through a SaaS marketplace to help scale up executives to grow and learn from other successful scale up executives. So it kind of fits into what we've talked about today, where learn from each other, build the network. We have content packaged up for people to learn what they need when they need it, and how they want it delivered, but also we help grow that community and that network. And so our goal is creating a digital platform that opens up that ecosystem for scale-up techs.
I love it. Well, Gene, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and obviously I will look forward to our next chat. And thank you so much for coming on and joining the CX Nation today.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you so much for having me. I always enjoy conversations around a customer, and I learn from you every day that we talk. So we'll keep it up.
Thank you, Gene.
Yeah, take care. Bye.